I declare the motion passed.
Proposed resolution under the pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma compensation ordinance. Members who wish to speak on the motion will please press the request to speak button. I call upon the Secretary for Labour and Welfare to speak and move the motion. Mr. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. The purpose of this resolution is to increase the maximum daily rates of medical expenses under the pneumoconiosis. Members, order please. To increase the maximum daily rates of medical expenses under the pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma compensation ordinance (PMCO). Under PMCO, a pneumoconiosis and or mesothelioma sufferer who has received medical treatment in respect of the above diseases may claim reimbursement of the actual amount of medical expenses incurred, subject to the maximum daily rate specified in the ordinance. According to the established mechanism, the maximum rates of medical expenses under PMCO are linked to public health care services fees and charges. Currently, the maximum daily rate for inpatient and outpatient treatment is both set at $200, whereas the maximum daily rate for inpatient and outpatient treatment received on the same day is set at $280. The new fees and charges for public health care services have taken effect since the 18th of June 2017. Based on the new fees and charges for public health care services, we propose to correspondingly increase the maximum daily rate of medical expenses for inpatient or outpatient treatment under PMCO from $200 to $300, and that for inpatient and outpatient treatment received on the same day from $280 to $370 in accordance with the established mechanism. The Pneumoconiosis Compensation Fund Board and the Labour Advisory Board have endorsed the above proposal. Moreover, the Legislative Council Panel on Manpower has supported, in principle, the government's proposal to increase the maximum daily rates of medical expenses under PMCO as soon as practicable. We propose that the revised maximum daily rates of medical expenses should become effective from the 2nd of February 2018. I urge members to support this resolution so as to enhance the protection of persons suffering from pneumoconiosis and or mesothelioma in terms of their medical expenses as early as possible.
I now propose the question to you that the motion moved by the Secretary for Labour and Welfare be passed. Dr. Fernando Cheung. Madam Deputy, I speak, of course, in support of this resolution for pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma patients if they will see an increase in the assistance level as a result of adjustment in the fees of the public healthcare system. So it's because in the public healthcare system fees have gone up. So for these patients, there is adjustment as well in the assistance. But such assistance is far from adequate from helping pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma patients. As the Secretary pointed out, they now given assistance on the basis of a public healthcare system. For the pneumoconiosis patients, the treatment they need may not be available from the public healthcare system in entirety. For example, some patients may eventually get cancer, lung cancer, or other forms of cancer. And now there are already newer target drugs that would be more effective in treating cancer with less side effect. And there are studies from overseas and in Hong Kong that such drugs could be more effective in extending the lifespan of patients. Unfortunately, for pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma patients, they do not get assistance for the use of such target drugs, and these drugs are expensive. For mesothelioma drugs, they are also expensive, but these drugs are effective form of treatment for these patients, but unfortunately they're not covered, and I find that a great pity. For the pneumoconiosis compensation fund, there is a balance there, so I hope that apart from making this adjustment, the government should revisit the whole mechanism. Maybe the fund could pay for such special drugs. Now, this disease affects the lung functions of patients. So patients need breathing apparatus. But under the current legislation, the rental for the machine to help breathing is not covered, and rental could be as much as $1,000 or $2,000 a month, so the patients have to pay for it themselves. The pneumoconiosis compensation fund has a lot of resources, and there are limited number of patients because it's in the past, because occupational safety measures were not done properly. That's why workers contracted pneumoconiosis or mesothelioma. These days, the occupational safety standards are definitely much higher, so there are very few new cases of these diseases. In any case, a line has been drawn under the compensation mechanism. So this fund will not be bankrupt because of additional assistance. Now, for these patients, very few could receive continuous care assistance from this fund. Why? Because the law requires the patients to go through inspection, like tests of the lung functions with this apparatus to breathe. But for some patients, because their lung functions are so poor, they cannot actually withstand this breathing test. So they're not able to complete the assessment. And for that reason, very ironically, doctors could not grant them an assistance for continuous care. And that's definitely putting the horse before the cart, and it flies in the face of the original intention of the assistance. Now, it's because patients are weak, they require continuous care. That's why they want to apply for assistance from this one. But because they're so weak, they're not able to perform that test. They have to blow into a machine, and they are not strong enough to even blow into that machine. So therefore, they cannot pass the assessment. But according to doctors, the provisions in the law are rather rigid, and they have to go through that test. So this doesn't make sense at all. Secretary, you are relatively new still to the post. I hope when there's a chance you would look into these issues. So definitely there is a loophole in the system. It's the same for burial expenses. The board is very stringent. Now, if the death is not directly caused by pneumoconiosis or mesothelioma, then they can't even apply for the burial grant. Now, we set up these funds with the purpose of helping those patients, and because we didn't do a proper job in occupational safety, perhaps it was the negligence of employers or the inadequacy of the system. So that's why these patients worked on a prolonged basis in an unhealthy work environment, and they breathed in much dust, and that's why they suffered from this occupational disease. Now, this one is supposed to help them face that, deal with their difficulties. We are not setting up a fund to try to set up barriers for the patients.
I'm not going to use up all 15 minutes Madam Deputy, of course I support the adjustment of rates, but in terms of what I said just now about the drugs for treating cancer, target drugs, rental of breathing machines, and subsidy for carers, and also burial grant, I hope that they can be reviewed. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Madam Deputy. Now the Secretary has moved a motion, the substance of which is similar to the previous resolution moved under the Employees' Compensation Ordinance. The maximum daily rates will be increased from 200 to 300 for inpatient or outpatient treatment, and the maximum daily rate for inpatient outpatient treatment received on the same day will be increased from $280 to $370. As I said in my previous speech, they are sticking to the old way without any innovative ideas to change the system. And as I said just now, it's been 15 years since the adjustment mechanism has been put in place, since 2003. It hasn't been adjusted since. I don't think it is reasonable. Just now, I already appealed to the Secretary to give it a thought. Well, perhaps I should change my stance. Must we wait till the next adjustment? Because the next adjustment won't come until the adjustment of public health care service fees. In other words, I won't be able to help workers. I should not say wait for the next adjustment. Instead, I should say do it as soon as possible. Change the mechanism and also review the degree of adjustment. Madam Deputy, I just now cited an example. This Bureau is so lazy. There is no breakthrough. I just now gave you a suggestion. I hope you think about it. Say, an unfortunate employee can only receive $370 for inpatient treatment if hospitalization is required. But what if he stays in the hospital for 365 days? That means $130,000 for him. Rounding up the figure. So why don't you give them the subsidy in one go, if they are eligible anyway? Because they are unfortunate enough to have to stay in hospital throughout the year. If you can disperse the subsidy in one go, it would really help them. Because like Dr. Fernando Cheung said, for the drugs, they can make use of the subsidy to buy drugs instead of receiving subsidy from you in drips and drabs. Will you give it a thought? Because the employees have been asking for this practice to be adopted many years. Since the chief executive advocates new thinking, you need to think about how useful the subsidy is for them. $370 daily rate for inpatient to outpatient service for them to receive care. Of course, it is better than nothing. And they can also opt for a private medical practitioner. But we should also know that $370 is not really sufficient for private medical practitioners' consultation, let alone medical fees. What about their medical condition? As far as we know, every day it takes at least $600. So the subsidy is not enough. And private medical consultation is so expensive that employees need to turn to other forms of assistance, which again can't help much. The only help would come from family members' savings. So, Secretary, can you come up with a new proposal within a year to change the system? Like Dr. Fernando Cheung said, these are employees who have contributed significantly to the prosperity of Hong Kong and its economic development. And as far as the system is concerned, we have not been taking care of them. They are suffering from conditions as a result of their work. It's occupational diseases. So they're sacrificing their health for society as a whole. But why is it that in the twilight years, when they suffer from these medical conditions, we're not allowing them proper medical treatment and care? It's a really difficult condition. They have shortness of breath. My mother also had the same condition. She finds it hard even to take a few steps on the stairs. You may not understand their plight, but as Secretary, I hope that you can be more understanding. You should have empathy so that you can formulate policies to help these workers. I'm not going to repeat what Dr. Fernando Cheung said. He already cited some good examples. What I want to say is the government is flushed with cash, and it's not really difficult to make this change. Even the fund is flushed with cash, not just the government. And I repeat my speech. I think everyone understands that. We have more and more cases every day. Well, unless the Labour Department, the inspection officers haven't done their job properly, in theory, there should not be new cases. Now, if there are new cases, more resources should be deployed from the fund to help the needy employees. It's really puzzling why this is not done. For employees, likewise, they feel puzzled because the fund is for their benefit. But if they can't receive proper care until they die, this is nothing but a token gesture. So as to say that on the face of it, you are setting up a dedicated fund to help these workers, whereas in fact they don't receive the help they need. It's really unfortunate because we all only live once. And as I mentioned just now, another problem is that these conditions won't emerge until the employee has reached his twilight years. It's great suffering. And it's not just his own suffering. His family members will also be affected as they need to look after the employee. A family member will have to give up his own life to be the employee's carer. So they're really in a predicament. Well, I have been liaising with the relevant organizations helping people suffering from pneumoconiosis. Many a time they would talk to us in tears because the medical expenses are very heavy. They cannot take this burden anymore, but then they need to beg the government to help. It's really heartbreaking. They're suffering from such serious conditions. We're asking you to bear in mind how they've contributed to society and that you should increase the amount of assistance. We've talked about it many times, and yet you continue to refuse. I don't know whether I should say that you're cold-blooded. I don't want to criticize your colleagues responsible for this part of the work, but I do have the feeling that the department is cold-blooded because their condition is not a result of their own undoing. It's because of the work, because of lack of awareness, lack of protection, lack of deterrence of the law, so on and so forth, leading to the suffering that they now have. Our economy is so good, and we do have the means to provide better care for them. And I can only say that you're being very lazy. You do nothing but to follow old rules for such a long period of time, as long as 15 years. And now this adjustment is only $100. Do you think that you should be ashamed as you're not doing justice to the workers? I see that you are expressionists. I don't think that means you have taken in anything at all. This is a dead system, and we are also so disappointed. We've lost hope because you are not doing anything to improve the system. Madam Deputy, I don't want to give a lengthy speech. I just want to emphasize that as society progresses, as we continue to say that we should enhance occupational safety and health, we should acknowledge the contributions made by these workers. Please don't give empty talk. Take action to reward them for their contributions to society in their twilight years. These diseases may not be curable. At least they may be given palliative care so that they understand that their hard work and the contribution is acknowledged by the government. It's better than nothing. So that they will not feel that their contribution is being ignored and that the government is so cold-blooded as they leave this world. The weather is so cold today, but I hope that the government will not be as cold. Give us some warmth so that in their dotage, these patients can also feel the warmth. I so submit, Madam Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak?
如果冇，我請勞工及福利局局長。
If not, I will invite the Secretary for Labour and Welfare to respond. The debate will come to a close afterwards. Secretary. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank members for their comments. Just like the previous resolution, we have heard the members loud and clear. In terms of our work, we're going to report the progress to the panel on manpower. In terms of the procurement of drugs, burial grant, application procedures for patients suffering from pneumoconiosis and mesothelioma, we are very concerned, and we've heard the comments, and we'll also discuss the matters with the fund. Of course, we'll also seek advice from experts and make adjustments at appropriate junctures. In fact, for the PMCO in the past, in terms of the scope of protection and the levels of protection, we have made adjustments, and in the future, we will continue to discuss with members at the panel on manpower on the relevant arrangements and safeguarding employees' rights. I now propose the question to you, that is, that the motion moved by the Secretary for Labour and Welfare be passed. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed.
議員議案。
Members' motions. Proposed